It's chestnut season, and I've been waiting all year, well, since I got back from Tuscany last year, to talk about chestnut flour, the original polenta. I call it the original polenta because when I was in Tuscany, one of the locals told me that before corn came from the New World, chestnut flour was basically the original polenta. This is the bag I bought online. It's super expensive, about 5 times more expensive than regular wheat flour, but it's totally worth it. Here's what we're going to go over. Number of different recipes, how to make your own chestnut flour, and there's a big catch with making your own chestnut flour. I basically include that for hardcore foragers. Step 1 is dry the chestnuts. You can leave them out and just put a fan on them, or you can put them in the dehydrator, and that'll take a few days, 2-3 days, until the shells are bone dry and the chestnuts are just rock hard. And one of the cool things is that the test, that kind of inner fuzzy skin, is going to remove really easily most of the time from the chestnut after the chestnuts are totally dried. Then the Vitamix dry bowl does a pretty darn good job here. I didn't even crush them up. I just put them straight in there. And we just grind these up. You could also crush the nuts using a hammer or something and put them through a grain mill, but they're a little large. Now, to make a really fine flour, we need to sift it. You probably want like a 40 mesh sieve here. This is a Tammy sieve that's about 40 mesh. And we're going to have to sift it 3 times to get a reasonably soft flour. And even then, it's nowhere near the soft flour that I purchased online, which you're going to see is pure white compared to the stuff that I make, which is kind of like cornmeal. Once I've sifted that a few times, I'll put it into a jar and store it in the fridge. You have to store it in the fridge or freezer so the oils don't go rancid. Okay, the big catch here. It is difficult to make a really fine flour at home. So the flour on the left is the one that I made. It basically cooks like cornmeal, and that's totally fine. You can make stuff like oatmeal or porridge, or if you get it nice and fine, you can make the crepes, the gnocchi that I'm going to talk about at the end here. The flour on the right basically looks like all-purpose flour, and for the amount of work that it takes to make such a fine flour at home, I mean, chestnut flour is really expensive, but you can just buy the super fine flour online and have it shipped to you, and it's really nice. But it's going to be difficult to make some of the recipes that I describe here if you're using the homemade flour. So nothing wrong with homemade flour, but it's going to be tricky to make pasta. You can make chestnut brownies. I made those in Tuscany. I'll have the recipe up on my site in about a week. Okay, chestnut pasta. This is the first thing. So with the commercial chestnut flour, one of the really cool things, it's super starchy, so we can use half chestnut flour and half all-purpose flour. You're also going to see that I use only egg yolks. This is very important. Egg whites, I don't like adding egg whites to pasta. Try making pasta with only egg yolks, and you're going to see the dough is so easy to work with. Make sure to start the mixer on low speed so you don't shoot flour all over the place. But you're going to see this dough it just comes together like a dream. The chestnuts are really starchy, and for whatever reason, they kind of defy the typical ratio of not adding more than 30% of a non-glutinous flour to a pasta dough. And you just knead a little bit after you work out with the paddle attachment. It comes together really fast. One of the easiest pastas I've made, and I can't believe it's half chestnut flour, so it's actually sweet. Then if you want to cut some noodles, you can cut this into any shape that you want. Just roll the dough up. Roll your sheet of pasta up after you roll it out. I roll this down to the third to last setting. I don't go all the way down, just because I don't want it to be brittle. Unravel the noodles. Voila, chestnut pasta. So next is chestnut gnocchi, and the cool thing here is that this is traditionally just made with the pasta dough, the same pasta dough that I just show you how to make. You can add fresh ground or chestnuts passed through a food mill to a potato dough if you want, but this is so much easier, and you get a lot more sweetness here because you're using the chestnut flour. So you just roll the dough into little logs, then you cut them into small pieces. I like these on the small side. Rolled them off a gnocchi board, just like regular gnocchi. There is gnocchi with a little goose confit, cabbage, cooked chestnuts, brown butter, sage. All right, chestnut polenta. This is so cool. It is not like regular polenta. The super fine chestnut flour that I have purchased, I've gotten it a number of times here. It's almost like, it's so fine, it's almost like cooking with acorn starch. And it takes much longer to cook than typical cornmeal, and you really have to get a lot of water out of it. And it's not something you're going to serve with, a ragu or something like that. This is a sweet, chestnuts are naturally sweet, so this is for a cheese course or a dessert or breakfast or brunch. It's a really special dish, but just saying polenta, when you hear the word polenta, it will be a little misleading. Once we cook it, I'm going to bake it in the oven too to get some extra moisture out to make sure I don't burn the bottom. We're just going to put that into a little bowl that I've greased a bit, let that cool down. And you can see, if you know acorn dotoromuk, the Korean acorn jelly, it's really similar, but it's crazy sweet. So cool. You cut little slices. You serve it with a little ricotta cheese, some chestnut honey, candied chestnuts. There's the last marigold of the year from my garden. Such a cool cheese course, breakfast, brunch dish, dessert. So cool. All right, gnocchi. These are super traditional Tuscan chestnut pancakes or crepes. Basically, think of them as crepes. And this is one thing that you can make with the homemade chestnut flour. This is actually my homemade chestnut flour that was actually pretty coarse. Take some milk, take an egg, pinch of salt, and I'll add a little bit of butter and the chestnut flour. Puree that up in the blender. Then we get a little pan hot. I like a 8-inch carbon steel skillet here, or just use a nonstick skillet. Put about a quarter cup of batter in the pan. And these can be kind of tricky if you want to make sure that the pan is really warmed up. So you might have, a fallen soldier or two in the beginning. Stack the crepes on a plate. And then we'll wrap them in cling film just to keep them nice and moist, make sure they don't dry out. And these are kind of like sweet cannelloni. So again, you're going to see ricotta cheese here. Again, we're going to make a little ricotta stuffing. Use some high quality ricotta. Those are just chopped roasted chestnuts. A little bit of warm chestnut honey. One of the strongest tasting honeys. You could use maple syrup too. A little bit of nutmeg. And I added orange zest to this one. I think I would probably add lemon zest in the next batch I do. The orange is perfectly fine, but chestnuts really have an affinity for lemon. You just put a few spoonfuls on the gnocchi, the little crepe. Roll it up. And it's good when they're fresh and hot out the pan, but you can heat them up too. A little bit of chestnut honey. I have a little poached orange zest, candied chestnuts. So good. There's a little breakdown of chestnut flour and some of the different things you can make with it. All the recipes are on my website. There's a link at the top of the video description for that. Thanks for watching.